Friends, tonight we'll make a winter scene, and it's not gonna be a diorama or anything, just a simple scenic vignette for this 1/48 scale Panzer 38T. I was lucky enough to find this block of styrofoam in my bag full of offcuts, and it's the perfect size for this project. I started by slicing off the top under a slight angle to get a small slope. This will make the scene more dynamic without making it too obvious. Now I could mark the road according to the tank's position in the scene. Yeah, it's gonna be the typical drop-off in the front of the tank and small hill behind it composition. The race section was made as a separate piece because it's much easier to manipulate and carve into desired shape, and then it was glued to the base using double-sided tape. The small creek at the front was carved directly into the base. I wanted to have a steeper bank, and because there won't be a tank submerged or anything, it's gonna be the first time I made a body of water with an actual bottom. I also made the rutted road from strips of styrofoam, once again held in place with double-sided tape. It's just much faster than using PVA glue. So this is our basic composition. It doesn't look very cash money because the features are all over the place, but that's because of a very simple trick. Using the foam cutter, I can not only remove the excess material, but also cut it perfectly flush with the scene. I also cut off a very tiny portion of the base itself, just to make sure everything is smooth and under 90-degree angles. Quick, simple, and the results are gonna look as if it was made from a single block of foam. The next stage is what I would consider a primer, so to say, for the groundwork. The acrylic texture paste from AK is very sticky and has a nice, rocky texture. This means it adheres to any type of surface, and once it dries, it'll be rock hard and gritty. Why am I mentioning this? Well, because it will act as a grip tape. I'd compare it to sticking sandpaper on a skateboard. As you see, my favorite terrain sculpting medium is VMS Smart Mud 2.0. It's a foamy, lightweight clay with a sandy texture. It's very soft, so it's ideal for the job, but it doesn't adhere well to smooth surfaces such as styrofoam. So the acrylic mud underneath acts as an anchor for the clay, but of course it also reinforces the styrofoam. That's a small bonus. As I'm spreading the clay, it sometimes creates interesting terrain formations and textures on its own, but for the most part it needs to be sculpted further if you have something more specific in mind. Ruts in the road are easily created with the opposite end of a paintbrush. These can represent tire tracks or some kind of erosion caused by water. Because the clay is soft, it's also very easy to press the model into it. This is one of the most important details in vignettes for me because nothing breaks the illusion more than a tank levitating above the ground. Also, track marks behind the tank are equally as important, especially in these muddy winter conditions. I had a leftover track segment from the kit, thank goodness, but otherwise I'd simply use the tank itself as a stamp. And while the clay was still soft, I added some basic features such as pebbles in the creek. These have to be round, not jagged, because that's just what flowing water does. And also a broken tree behind the tank, made from a broken twig. I attached it with a bit of superglue and used the VMS clay to blend it into the ground. I was just in too much of a hurry to sculpt the roots around it. Once the clay was hard and dry, I could laminate the sides with 0.4mm wooden veneer. Someone asked me why I keep using this expensive material when I paint the sides black anyway, and well, it's because it's durable, reliable, flexible if needed, and overall just easy to work with. And it has just the right amount of texture so it doesn't look bland like a painted sheet of plastic or paper. The job became even easier and more enjoyable since I started using double-sided tape instead of PVA glue. I still make sure the veneer stays in place properly, so I always pour some super glue in those areas where it meets the ground, and also on the edges. The super glue acts as a filler, but it makes sure the sides won't separate when I'm sanding them. The result is gonna be absolutely spotless and very professional looking once the scene is finished. And it's another aspect of dioramas or vignettes that I find crucial, because Sure, it's fun to model and paint the scenery, and that's what everyone enjoys looking at, but on the other hand, the sides have a huge impact on the overall presentation, so it's always worth investing some time and effort into them. Now that we have the basic shape of the ground, with the laminated sides nicely blended with the ground, we can proceed to the texturing stage. Even if a lot of the ground will be covered in snow, I didn't want to take any chances. Besides, adding the ground texture is totally easy. The VMS clay is like a sponge, so I can soak it up with diluted PVA glue and sprinkle real earth from my garden, trademark, on top of it. If there's a lot of dirt, I soak it up once again, but this time with alcohol, which breaks the surface tension. Saturated earth like this also acts as a sponge, so it's very easy to flood it with diluted PVA and it'll get nicely absorbed into the ground. But more often than not, the basic sprinkling over a wet surface is sufficient. The texture will spread out evenly and nicely cover the entire surface. While the ground is still somewhat wet and sticky, I always sprinkle some dried seagrass, which acts as a bottom layer for vegetation. As such, I try to avoid frequented areas like a dirt road. This way, we can distinguish various surface features with different textures. And once it had enough time to dry, I proceeded with the actual grass. Thick glue is more suitable here because it will help the grass form those nice fluffy clumps, and because this scene is in a 1/48 scale, I went with the shortest grass I have. 5 millimeters maybe? One might think that grass isn't so important in a winter scene, but as you'll see, it will help us create a very nice and unique texture in the snow. By the way, I've been using this random no-name static grass applicator from eBay for more than 2 years now, and it does the job perfectly. As a finishing touch, I added a bunch of roots to the bank. I used a lot of them in my Panzer of the Lake diorama, and as a result, I had barely anything left, but I think it'll suffice. Anyway, that's the whole scene ready for painting, and because I enjoyed the results in the previous diorama, and because a lot of it will be hidden by the snow, I'll take the partially painted approach. The first step is always somewhat obligatory in this approach, priming the grass with a dark brown mahogany primer. This one works better than the black one because there's always some overspray, and it's much easier to hide dark brown overspray on a dark brown groundwork than trying the same with black. The point is to make the grass completely 100% dark. Next up, I sprayed it with desert yellow from Tamiya. This is a very nice color for dark, dried up grass because that's what I'm going for in this scene. No vivid green tones or anything, my friends. Dark yellow was then added in smaller, controlled amounts. It's similar to spraying the grass with a dark green color and then making it lighter by adding yellow into the mix. In other words, I like to post-shade the grass so it looks denser and more interesting. Now comes the interesting part. Painting the ground has always been an important technique in my approach to dioramas, but it often led me to some problems. Even though I always used the same colors for the ground as I used for weathering on the tank, it was not always easy to match them together because the underlying black primer kept changing the tone of the groundwork. Well, I'm not sure if it's just beginner's luck here, because it's the first time I'm using this partially painted approach with a tank in the scene, but as you'll see, the results will be more predictable. And to finish it off, khaki drab was lightly sprayed in the creek, the same color I'll use to tint the resin. So that takes care of the basic colors. I like this step because it helps to shift the overall tone of the scene where we want it, so ultimately we're not limited by the raw color of the materials we use. And here's what I was talking just a few seconds ago. Using the partially painted ground as a base, I applied generous enamel washes with earth from Ammo. Yes, that's the name of the paint. And winter streaking rime. These are the two enamel products I used to paint the mud on the tank, so it's only logical to use them on the ground as well. Well, again, maybe it's just a lucky coincidence or it's totally legit, but it was so easy to achieve the same tone on the ground and on the tank. No tinkering around for hours, just a quick overall wash with earth and then some selective washes, stains and shadows with winter streaking grime. I blended some slimy grime in the creek to emphasize that wet, muddy and, well, slimy look of things. And once the enamels were mostly dry, I applied more selective washes with the winter streaking grime again. This helps to bring out various terrain features, be it the rutted road, various holes or prominent textures, or track marks, because it's always good if these are immediately visible, right? And just like that, we have the base weathered. Sure, it basically just became darker than it was, but that's because it's muddy ground. But more importantly, the tank looks like it belongs in the scene, and I can't stress enough how crucial this thing is. Moving on, let's finish the creek before we start adding the snow. I painted the large pebbles and some larger clumps of earth in various grayish tones, just to make the bottom look more detailed. While I was at it, I also picked out a few stones in the rest of the scene, but just a few. To avoid air bubbles coming from the bottom, something that happened in my last diorama, I sealed the terrain in a thin coat of still water. It suddenly turns the nice creek bottom into something truly hideous, but it's a part of the process. Once it was dry, I created a rudimentary dam from Tamiya masking tape. I must say that taping oval bases is much easier because it's the sharp corners where the tape starts to make funny shapes, and it takes a bit of back and forth before it starts acting accordingly to our needs. Reinforcing it with something thicker, such as this double-sided tape, helps a lot too. This brings us once again to the epoxy resin. Working with the one from AK is fun because it's very user-friendly, and for this scene I mixed 10 ml of resin and 5 ml of hardener. I won't use all of it anyway, and to make it murky, I didn't add any drops of paint as usual. Instead, I just dipped the airbrush needle in khaki drab and mixed it with the resin. Okay, so this is not like making another Panzer of the Lake or a Mark IV tank sunken in a shell crater. This is a small body of water and every drop makes a huge difference. So I had to pour it very carefully. It's also important to keep in mind how the resin tends to crawl up the ground, and if you're not careful, it can start spilling out above the tape. Anyway, despite the tight working conditions, it was probably the most satisfying pour for me. Probably because the resin had the right translucency, so after I removed those few air bubbles with a blowtorch, I protected the diorama from dust and left it to dry overnight. And do you know what was waiting for me in the morning? Yup, a smooth glass-like surface. If there was ever a reason to get out of bed before 9 AM, then this is it. Here's the tiny leak I was talking about, but it's nothing serious, and it was only caused by the creeping resin that got above the tape, and then it got absorbed by the veneer. Well, because I had to finish the water, ice and snow all in one day, I quickly finished the water by shaving off the raised edges with a sharp hobby blade, and once those were not a problem anymore, I quickly stippled a very thin coat of clear acrylic gel on the smooth, glass-like surface, making it not look like glass anymore. I also brushed it on the sides for that highly glossy, transparent look. While the gel was drying, I made some cracked sheets of ice. My first experiment was spreading still water over a transparent foil and mixing it thoroughly with snow microballoons, but this method didn't work too well, because the resulting ice was getting deformed as I was removing it from the foil, and it didn't quite look natural either. I had more success with ice sparkles mixed with still water, and this concoction was spread over a sheet of glass. Okay, the overhanging roots made the job a little trickier, but the point was to attach the ice with superglue and keep it slightly above the water. This is based on a reference photo I snapped in my village during the winter, knowing it'll come in handy one day. The resulting gaps between the ice sheets and the bank were filled with snow sprinkles. This is an awesome snow product because it has texture and it looks shiny, but it's also translucent. So why stop here? I'll cover the entire ground with it. Well, okay, of course, it's not gonna be the entire ground, but here's the thing. Some of you might have noticed how similar this vignette is to the 100 scale Stück 3 vignette I did almost 2 years ago. It had a very similar composition, just very simplified, and it was also set in winter. But back then I only had the snow sprinkles and micro balloons. which is basically a fine powder, so my options were quite limited when I was recreating the snow. Little did I know that snow sprinkles is one of the best snow products ever. As it starts to dry, it will become more translucent, and for example, if you apply it very thin, the result won't be even visible. So when you apply it in these thick clumps, the ground will be visible around the edges. It recreates partially melted but also frozen snow perfectly. Because of this, I believe it's possible to make most snow effects with just this one product. For thicker, fresher and more opaque snow, AK has another snow product named Snow, very original. This one is not a paste like snow sprinkles, it's more of a lightweight foam, so to say. At first I didn't like the application, but actually it makes creating realistic, smooth clumps of fresh snow easier. This was a new experience for me, and now I just kinda wish I kept this layer more restrained, but nonetheless, the results were surprisingly simple and fast. It's just that initial mental block that makes you hesitant to go full send with these kinds of effects, you know? Now that we have most of the surface covered and the creek is finished, there's only one more thing left to do. Integrate the tank into the scene and add some slushy, wet horribleness on the road. Being more familiar with how snow sprinkles work now, I applied them around the road and over each raised portion of the rutted surface, and then blended the edges with tap water. This already looks like proper melted snow, doesn't it? After gluing the tank to the ground, I applied more of the same stuff around its tracks and blended that as well. It creates a tighter bond between the model and the vignette, adding more weight to the model. And although it wasn't my intention to make the tank overly muddy and wet, it just needed something more, you know, especially on those tracks. So I carefully applied the slush, blending it with tap water, trying not to go overboard of course, because if the road is muddy, there wouldn't be much snow on the tracks. And the final magic trick was applying some enamel earth from Ammo, the same one we used previously, sort of as a diluted wash. Snow sprinkles act as a sponge, so they'll nicely absorb the paint, and the results are just pure awesome. Getting a result like this made me super happy because even though I haven't used any wet mud, or gloss varnish, or anything of that sort on the ground, or the tank actually, the dirty, melted snow created an awesome atmosphere. Just a proper, muddy slush ball. You know, that kind of winter hike you wouldn't enjoy. I kept wondering if there was anything else missing in the scene, but because I wanted to keep it simple, I proceeded to the final touch. Painting the sides in a generous coat of flat black Tamiya paint. That's something I do on all my dioramas, but I feel like it works especially well with winter scenes, because it kinda enhances that look. I don't know, black just contrasts pretty well with the snowy landscape. So anyway, my friends, that's gonna be it for this little project. If you watched the previous video where I painted the tank, you might remember that it's a friend's model. He gave it to me assembled and airbrushed in Panzer Grey, and I just added the winter camo, reworked the stowage a little, and weathered it. He's been pestering me for the longest time, saying how he would love to have a vignette under one of his models, and I don't know, this was like the perfect opportunity to make one for him. Because it was a standalone model and I didn't have any diorama friendly figures for it, I had pretty much no idea what kind of composition or situation I would want to place it in. So to make my life easier and focus on the fun part, I went with the tested and proven composition. A model across a rectangular base, a hill behind the model, and a terrain depression in the front. Totally identical to my Shtuk 3 vignette, except now I added the epoxy resin water because that's just too much fun, you know? And of course, the bigger scale opens up new possibilities. I wanted to drive to my friend's place and surprise him with the finished scene and get some of our dialogue on video so I could include it here, but sadly, other duties came up, so I can just hope he will like it. And after I'm done rambling here, I'm gonna start laying down new floors in my house. And you know what? Building models and remodeling your house all at the same time is fun because you never have time to get bored. In fact, you don't have time for anything, but anyway, thank you for watching, my friends, and thank you to my awesome patrons who make this show possible. If you like what I'm doing, want to get more of it, and in return support my work, you can go to my Patreon page and see what kind of reward would you like. I'm posting there almost every day with updates from my workbench. We can get in touch through DMs, comments, and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos, although I need to take a small break now because I'm currently living, sleeping, and working in one room. Yeah, I also have some small 3D models for detailing your models in dioramas, a bunch of references from the real world if you need inspiration for old buildings, landscapes, and so on. And last but not least, these beautiful studio photos which you can download in full resolution. Alright, dear friends, I already have an idea for the next project and I'll start working on it as soon as possible. It's gonna be another fairly interesting topic with its own color palette, so I hope you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, you all stay safe, stay awesome, build your models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!